All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session of the conference, or at least the last group of sessions for the conference. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Isaac Panzarella, Assistant Director with the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center at NC State University. Let me say happy Earth Day to everyone out there and all of our panelists. We're gonna have a series of presentations from each of our panelists, and then we'll have some discussion at the end. I would ask that you participants out there, if you would enter your questions or comments into the Q&A feature at it's a button at the lower right of your Zoom window. With that, I'll go ahead and introduce the panelists today. First up, we're going to have John Jacob, who is a energy solutions manager with Blue Ridge Energy. He's going to talk about tools for shaping residential load. We have Don Bowman, who's the vice president of engineering and operations with the Wake Electric Membership Cooperative. He's going to talk about Wake Electric's approach to shaping residential electric demand. Todd Alinsky-Paul is joining us from Vermont. He's the senior project director with the Clean Energy Group, and he's going to talk about virtual power plants. Really great concept that's starting to take hold in different places. Then finally, we'll have David Williamson, who's a utilities engineer with the public staff of the North Carolina Utilities Commission. I guess you're in the electric section, David. That's why we have you here, and you're going to talk about some of the public staff's perspective on that. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Really looking forward to the discussion among the group too at the end, and questions from all of you out there participating. I will say, for us at the Clean Energy Technology Center, we work in clean energy, which includes distributed generation, both renewable and non-renewable, but also a lot of what we do involves energy efficiency and alternative transportation, and so really load shape demand really plays into a lot of what we do, a lot of things that we can do that can have a beneficial impact. And to be clear, what we're trying to do is really to flatten demand curves out there in the electric sector. That would help in many ways to maximize the use of energy resources, as well as to help manage costs. It's often that the last bit of energy that you have to generate for the peak is the most expensive energy, and oftentimes not the cleanest energy that you're generating. So I think this is a very important topic, and we're going to really focus here on the residential sector for the purposes of this discussion. With that, I think we're ready to get rolling here. I'm going to ask the other panelists besides John Jacob, who's starting, to go ahead and turn their cameras off. John, and if you would share your screen, you have the floor.
Are you seeing me full screen?
I think you need to swap the screens. Now we can see your slideshow correctly.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Jacob. I'm the Energy Solutions Manager at Blue Ridge Energy in Western North Carolina. And I'm going to be talking about the tools in our toolbox for shaping demand, and specifically residential demand. We purchase power from Duke Energy, and we are on a 20 coincident peak rate schedule for demand during the summer months only. So that's from June to the end of September is when we're actively engaged in trying to reduce our peak demand, which primarily occurs in the afternoon between 2 and 6 p.m. So be very focused on things we actually are already doing and how we do them versus plans for the future. But hopefully we'll get into those things as we have a discussion later. So our plan of action for attacking residential demand kind of starts with monitoring a live load signal that we receive from Duke, as well as their load forecast, primarily in the load centers in Charlotte, the Triad, and Greenville. We're on Duke Energy Carolinas. And so what we're doing is we're attempting to know when they are crossing into setting a peak, which is difficult early on in the summer until you've had those hours, but it gets easier later in the summer. And so we've basically established a tool to monitor that live signal and then take action accordingly when we cross into setting a peak hour. So I've listed the programs that we operate in order of efficacy, starting with CVR, conservation voltage reduction. And I'm not going to go too deep into that because that's Don's wheelhouse and he's the master at that. But we do it as well in a more limited fashion. And it is definitely the thing that drives the biggest savings in terms of our demand and demand cost. We also operate some legacy radio frequency load control switches that are pretty old, from the early 80s. They're not making parts for the control boards that we send a signal to these switches with. They are equipped on AC and water heaters throughout our service territory. And we're just trying to wring the last little bit of juice out of that program that we can. It is fairly effective, cycling the water heaters and the air conditioners on and off in 15-minute intervals. And we have, for the last 2 summers, participated in Google's Nest Rush Hour Rewards program for smart thermostats in a kind of a pilot program, which has proven to be very reliable and useful. We're just limited by the number of participants we have. In year 1, we had something like 75, and last year we got up to 150 participants. So that has been a successful program. It's just limited in scope. Then we do a voluntary Beat the Peak program, which it just consists of our members electing to be notified when we expect to go into peak, whether that's going to be like a Sunday night week ahead notification, or ideally a night before notification, so people without smart thermostats can raise that thermostat before they leave for work. And that also is just an educational tool in helping our members understand what demand is, when it occurs, and how their behavior and actions can help reduce power costs for the entire cooperative. It's kind of bringing them into the team. Sometimes at these energy conferences, it's easy to forget that not everybody's an energy nerd. So trying to create the marketing for a program like Beat the Peak that is easily understood and provides actionable intelligence to our members, to our consumers, has been a pretty successful program. And I'll go into the M&V for that a little bit later. And finally, community solar gardens have proven to be very, very useful in reducing our peak demand. We've actually built 5 fairly small community solar gardens since 2016. And we oriented them slightly to the southwest, which has been very useful in pushing that production back in the day from peaking. A traditional south-facing array would peak around noon or 1 o'clock. By orienting the community solar gardens to the southwest, we get much better production in that 2 to 6 p.m. window where we're looking to reduce our peak. And so all things considered, we have saved around $600,000 in demand cost in 2020. And that's been fairly consistent over the past 2 to 3 years that we've been operating the majority of these programs. So quickly, conservation voltage reduction, again, is Don Bowman's baby. But we do it on about 2/3 of our circuits. 66 of the 104 circuits we have are equipped with CVR equipment. There's a total of about 36,000 meters that are affected by conservation voltage reduction. We reduce voltage between the substation and the first regulator on these circuits. And last year it provided just over 1 megawatt of demand savings across all our 20 CP hours. That was the average. We're basically, standard operation is 125 volts. We drop that to 121.5 or 122 during CVR. And that 3% load drop equates to about a 2%, that 3% voltage reduction equates to about a 2% load drop for us. All right, moving on, the load control switches, the actual physical controls we have in members' homes. We've got about 3,000 air conditioning switches and about 15,000 water heater radio frequency switches. The thought was that in the summertime, we weren't going to see a lot of savings from the water heaters. People generally aren't washing dishes or taking showers between 2 and 6 p.m. On summer afternoons. That may have changed a little bit last year with COVID and a lot more people being home. And we measure the performance of these switches by aggregating all the hourly meter data from homes equipped with a switch. And so again, that actually was a little bit more than CVR last year, probably because of COVID. We got an average of 1.1 megawatts of demand savings across our coincident peak hours. The Google Nest Rush Hour Rewards program was operated as a pilot for the past 2 summers. And as of the end of last summer, like the end of September, we had 130 units, thermostats enrolled. And we added a few more, so we're at 150 now. And it's very consistent. It provides about 0.4 kW per thermostat of demand savings. So all things considered, it was 50 kW that we saved from the Rush Hour Rewards program. Be great to pick up a lot more thermostats, like something like a bring your own thermostat program that would include Ecobee as well, is something that we've looked at. A company called Virtual Peaker offers that. And so we would like to expand that, but it has proven to be very reliable in the limited scope that we've operated it in. Wanted to show you how we do the M&V, and it's in partnership with Empura, which is my friend Daniel Kaufman's company. And he, has done this for utilities. He's done this, for building and facilities managers. But what we're looking at is a specific day. We're looking at July 9th, this last summer, and we're looking at the Google Rush Hour Rewards program. And so what you see, we went into control at 3 p.m., but you can see the spike before we went into control is from some pre-cooling that is done, trying to get the homes cooled down ahead of control so we can ride through the event with less need for the heat pump to be operating. You see the really nice steep drop as you go into control, and it's hourly meter data, so the granularity is only at hour intervals, but you see that nice steep drop. And then as we came out of the event, as members do tend to opt out the further into the event you get. We were in control for 4 hours, which was the limit we were allowed in the Google program on this day. And we basically utilized that full 4-hour limit every time we went in, just to make sure we captured as many hours as we could. And again, you're seeing the per device contribution somewhere around 0.4 kW per hour. And just one of the limitations that is difficult with the Rush Hour Rewards program is you're given a limited number of events you can control throughout the month and throughout the season, throughout that quarter. And so there would be times where we had operated, several events early on in a month and then had a spell of 3 or 4 days in a row with really hot weather, and we were running out of events to use in that particular month. So that was a challenge, trying to figure out when to call events and when we kind of might need to sit back and wait for a hotter day in order to save our bullets, so to speak. Beat the Peak is a voluntary member engagement program. There are no incentives associated with it. We do tout the potential power cost savings to our members, try and get them to understand how they're part of the team and how their behaviors and what they do in their home specifically during those afternoon hours really contributes to peak demand, and helping to try and teach them what demand is as a concept and how they can participate in helping us reduce it. We send text messages, emails, in-app notifications through our Blue Ridge mobile app, as well as social media posts. We do basically a mix of all those things. Members do elect to sign up for which types of notifications they want to receive. Some are receiving more than one, some are receiving just one. But as of the end of last summer, we had 6,500 unique households participating, but we had 8,800 different types of notifications going out to those households. It might be the husband and the wife, might be a kid in the household, maybe it's grandma too, but we have sent over almost a quarter of a million notifications since we began the program in 2018. And through Empura's measurement and valuation, we have determined that the average savings just from a behavioral impact is around 425 kW. And that was most successful this last summer. Again, my thought is probably has something to do with COVID and people being home and able to raise the thermostat or avoid, high impact activities like washing clothes, washing dishes. We encourage our members to try and grill outdoors on hot summer afternoons instead of cooking indoors and heating the home and causing the heat pump to work more. We encourage the use of ceiling fans, just any little small action, no matter how small, even turning off one single light bulb or switching to LEDs. We try and help our members understand that every little action adds up when it's across the entire service territory. Community solar gardens have been very successful for us. We originally built 4 in partnership with statewide NCEMC and a group called the National Renewable Cooperative Organization. So the original 4 gardens we built are all 100 kW, and that was determined because in our full rights agreement, that was the maximum size solar array we could construct for demand reduction purposes without going through an approval process with Duke. They are located, one garden is located in each one of our primary counties that we serve. So that's Caldwell, Watauga, Ashe, and Allegheny. These original 4 are all the same, 368 panels, 1,472 panels total. And they are, again, oriented to the southwest to push solar production back later in the afternoon. These original 4 produce about 600,000 kilowatt hours per year. That's been fairly consistent. And we have both a net metering rate and a buy all, sell all net billing rider. The vast majority of participants are doing the net metering rate for community solar. And any member who consumes more than an average amount of energy, which on Blue Ridge is 1,000 kilowatt hours a month on average, they are able to save money on our net metering rate. So we did have some success subscribing these panels as an environmental green initiative, but we also had a lot of success targeting low income members and high usage households utilizing the subscription to community solar as a tool to reduce your monthly bill. And so these 4 gardens were fully subscribed within a year of commissioning the original 4. And at that point, we started a waiting list, and that filled up fairly quickly. And we, 3 years later, decided to build a 5th community solar garden ourselves without going through the NCEMC PPA model. We just built this in partnership with a Blue Ridge member called Collaborative Solar out of Boone. And we were able to reduce costs significantly by doing it ourselves. So the subscription for all panels, even the ones that were already subscribed, was reduced from $4.50 a month to $3.75 based on the savings we realized by building it ourselves and applying for a REAP grant from USDA. This 5th garden has 432 panels, produces a bit more energy than the original 4. It produces 175,000 kilowatt hours on its own. It is also fully subscribed now, and we're able to participate in a low-income community solar pilot with DEQ. They provided funding to attach 4 panels to 10 homes with high usage, with a target goal of saving those homes $40 per month on average. And so just recently finished attaching panels to the last 4 homes, and we will now begin providing some M&V for the savings on those homes that are at the pilot. So in total, all 5 sites produce 764,000 kilowatt hours in 2020. That contributed to an average demand reduction during our 20 CP hours of 283 kW. And members who are participating in the program receive about 35 kilowatt hours of solar generation credit per month per panel. And the savings comes from both the credit, and they also pay less in their distribution energy charge. We have an unbundled rate, and it's about 1.4 cents cheaper on our net metering rate for community solar versus a standard residential rate. So the members with a lot of consumption, anywhere over 1,000, as I mentioned, but people who use 2,000 and occasionally you have mobile homes and such that use 3,000 kilowatt hours or more during the winter. They're really saving quite a bit of money, and it's really a help to them. So we've been very happy with both the demand performance of community solar and how it's brought our members kind of into participating in solar when they might not have been able to put it on their roof due to cost, due to shading issues or topography or the age of the roof. It's made solar accessible to a lot more Blue Ridge members. So we're very happy with that. And that's all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing and kick it back to Isaac.
Great presentation, John. Really impressive at the amount of things that you're able to do, but it does take, I guess, years and years to build this up. And we look forward to hearing more from you later on about what you're looking at in the future. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Don Bowman. Don, I think you're going to share your own screen and show us what you're doing at Wake Electric.
Does everybody see my full screen now?
No, we can see you, but not
Okay.
your shared screen.
Huh. All right, I've got the green bar and everything. 1 second.
Okay.
Let's do this. What are you looking at right now? Still looking at me?
We can see your PowerPoint window.
Okay, okay, so let me switch
Put it
this
in
back.
slideshow, then
It is always, now I need to share the other screen, correct?
correct.
Okay,
In the top left, you can just use that display setting drop-down box.
yep. Okay, we're just gonna do this real quick. How about now?
Right on, but I think we are, yeah, I think we may be on your second slide. so
Okay.
up one.
That sounds right. That sounds
All
right.
right.
We'll get back there. Sorry, everyone. It always seems to happen. My name is Don Bowman. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Operations for Wake Electric. We are just northeast of Raleigh, North Carolina. Appreciate all the comments that John had to say. I will stand up in front of anybody and say electric cooperatives on a whole do such an excellent job of being in the community and educating our members on what it is about what the peak really means and what the rates are really made up of. But John and his team do it just as good as anybody and better in a lot of categories. So appreciate his comments. A little bit about Wake Electric is that we are an NCEMC member, and we have a little bit different rate than John at Blue Ridge. We have a 12-month CP, so we are looking at that. We are looking at that 1 peak hour each and every month. And so sometimes that could be in the AM hours in the wintertime, and sometimes that could be in the early evening hours in the summertime, of course. We are, the biggest thing I can say about Wake Electric right now is that we are growing extraordinarily fast. You can tell by our region, if you look at that map real quick, Eastern Durham is actually North Briar Creek. So anybody familiar with the area around Raleigh, you know, Briar Creek is a growing area. And so that is growing in our area. And obviously the Wake Forest community is growing very quickly. So you can see that we serve more than 49,000. But if you look a couple slides down, we are adding about 2,100 new meters per year. So we're very close to celebrating our 50,000th meter on our system, which is which puts us a little bit higher than the medium-sized cooperatives around the country. I always like to point out that we're essentially 100% smart meters, and smart meters are what allow us to really gauge how we're doing and shaping the load curve for our members. Looking at that 15-minute or hourly data really does help us understand whether some of the programs and education that we're doing is working. So very important to have the technology in place. I always like to point out that, you know, of the 17,000 area and street lights, we've basically switched those all out to LEDs, and we add about 650 new street lights per year. And while that doesn't do a whole lot for flattening the curve, what that does is add a lot of capacity availability in the evening hours, which will come up as we talk more about a couple of our programs. Wake Electric, obviously, when we survey our members and see the enormous growth going on in our territory, we get the same ask every time we talk to our members. They want affordability and reliability, and that's pretty much what we're asked for. We are so busy trying to take care and handle the growth that we're seeing in our system. We are putting in the technologies that really allow us to gauge and monitor and put sensors across our system so that we are finding we are able to improve losses and able to build ties so that we can have reliability. And we're really trying to hit that there. We have more of a hands-off approach with direct contact with programs for our members. So far, we are deviceless. We have not done thermostats. We've not done in-home devices. But what we've really focused on are more carrots that we can show our members to say, let us give you the tools, and you take those tools and incentives and run with them and make them work for you and your household. I will focus on conservation voltage reduction a little bit, like John said. I'll also just talk about our education of solar plus storage and a residential standpoint. Talk about how we're able to really approach things with an innovative rate structure, and talk a little bit about our promotion of electric vehicles. So conservation voltage reduction, I just have a couple slides, but I really want to emphasize how this is such low-hanging fruit for Wake Electric. We are largely residential in our load. We're about 97% residential. Those that don't know, conservation voltage reduction is temporarily reducing the system voltage to achieve load reduction during peak hours. We are doing this, like John said, at the substation regulators, but we at Wake Electric have gone full out. We have multiple downline regulators. All of them now are tied into our SCADA, and we go well beyond our downline regulators to have multiple zones so that we're able to really reduce every meter across our system today and get the maximum reduction. We utilize AMI data, which means every meter we have on our system is capable of giving us a real-time voltage. And that voltage is letting us know that whether we have surpassed any thresholds that would be delivering poor quality of voltage. As you know, the ANSI standard says we can't go below 114 at a house. Therefore, every meter on our system is sitting there to tell us whether we've gone below 114 or not. As soon as we do, our system backtracks and makes sure we're actively trying to get the power quality where it needs to be. And with that active response, every single feeder is treated completely different, and every single feeder and zone is done separately to try to get maximum effect. This past summer, we were able to achieve about 4.1% total demand reduction on our system. And as you can see, that could get up to 8 megawatts of reduction during the peak just by reducing voltage. And I will make sure I point out that when you do this, this is nothing active that the consumer has to do. In fact, no one knows we're doing this when it happens. And when I say that, we've been doing this now for 7 years, and I have a total of 0 residential complaints that we've ever adjusted their voltage when this happens. But we can see significant reduction when that occurs. This is not the best one that we've ever had, but this just shows a winter peak. Basically, we're showing that we had a peak of about 161.7. That's the adjusted peak. We actually have a savings of 3.7 megawatts. We were able to do this with 4% voltage reduction. And with 4% voltage reduction, we got a total of 2.3% demand reduction during the winter. Now, while this is you're looking at system load, you can pretty much see this on a smaller scale, and it's going to be very reciprocal across all of our members' individual load profiles. The second way that we do it, this is just a site from our website, and we are really trying to educate our members on the basics of solar power. And what you're looking at here is a graph that we like to show, that the red line on this graph shows a perfectly sunny day, a green line shows a partly cloudy day, and the blue line shows a cloudy day in the output of solar. We want everybody to recognize that those orange bars that we see on the early morning and late afternoon timeframes are really when our peak usage times are occurring. And this is where we really start to hone in on the value of adding residential storage to their solar panel installation. And so we currently do not do a true net metering here at Wake Electric. We do a modified net metering. We, as you may know, cooperatives are nonprofit and not-for-profit and member-owned. And so we buy back at the avoided cost rate of 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So it is much better financially for our members to store that power and use it during our peak than it would be to sell it back to us at regular times of the day. So we spend a lot of time educating our members. In fact, at Wake Electric, at our office in Wake Forest, you will find solar panels and a Tesla Powerwall all on display, with the chance for us to invite members in to explain how it works. And in our simple display, we have a pump on a fountain outside of our office. That fountain is running 24 hours a day off solar. And so during the day, the solar panels are running the pump, but also feeding a battery for a Powerwall. Once the sun goes down, the Tesla Powerwall keeps the pump running throughout the night to really prove how that does shape the load a lot differently. This is something we're just really starting to keep track of, and this is a Venn diagram that we're starting to really get our hands around and react to. And that's the fact that we have a time of use rate. A time of use rate tells our members that if you could come off and reduce your power during 2 hours a day, and in the summertime, that's obviously 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., that you would get a lower rate on the other 22 hours of the day. Now, that's not for everybody, but because not everybody, especially in the demographics we're seeing in some of our growth areas, that's not a demographic that wants to be dictated when they can and can't use it. But the tool is there with time of use. We have 194 solar accounts, and that 194 solar accounts makes up for about 1.4 megawatts of solar on our system, but it's on individual rooftops, and the members have made their own decisions to put it there. But we also have electric vehicles. We're trying to keep track of how many have electric vehicles. And of course, the Venn diagram shows us how many have all three, or how many are on our time of use rate. And as we look at that, we're really evaluating what rates can we apply that really make sense for these members to give them incentive to react. And so one of the most recent one, which will be, actually it's been voted on and approved by our board of directors, that will be started on May 1st, is a special solar rate. As I told you, with the amount of solar in the state right now, we are we definitely see that the wholesale cost of power at midday has gone down. Therefore, if you have solar, we have just enacted a new rate that is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we've lowered your whole home rate to from 10.7 cents to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. In that time frame, what we're trying to incent our members to do is load it up. Use that solar that you're generating. Use it. Don't sell it back to us. We want you to take things from that you would normally run in the evening time or early in the morning and use it midday, trying to push our usage to use it during that time. And if they're conscious enough to have solar on the rooftop, they're conscious enough to start thinking about this is the true way that we can help both them save money, Wake Electric members save money, and help our environment. And then I want to talk about our electric vehicle charging rate. This is just a graph that shows Wake Electric members that have electric vehicles. We have decided that all you have to do is show us a proof of purchase of an electric vehicle. And from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., we give you a 2% whole home discount. And what you're seeing right here in the green bar chart is the amount of charging done by electric vehicles that do not have a special time of use EV rate. And what you're seeing in the red bar chart are Wake Electric users. So what you can see is that we are looking at Wake Electric members are not charging from pretty much 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., but at 11 p.m. at night, you see a big spike in usage. And what that really drives is a chart that looks like this. And really what I want to point out is the green line are non-EV users. The gray line are EV users. And probably the most telling thing is right there in the middle of the day. People that are EV users are actually lowering their peak compared to other users that would peak in that mid-morning time frame. And that may be because they're using our whole home rate as an EV rate to move some of their load to after hours. And because you could see that their usage definitely goes down at 6 a.m. Down to where it is at 6 a.m. So we think that these type of innovative rates are really driving behavior, and we hope that that continues, and we'll continue to think of innovative ways to teach and educate our members on what beating that peak really means. So with that, I will yield the floor, and we can go to the next presenter.
All right, terrific, Don. I've only known you for a little while, but I've been impressed as you're an engineer's engineer. I just want to remind everyone that you can, if you have a need for professional development hours, either as an architect, a professional engineer, or a lead certified professional, as well as an attorney, you can claim hours for that. There's instructions on our website or the conference website in the upper right-hand side on continuing education credits there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Olinsky-Paul from the Clean Energy Group. Todd, I'm going to put your presentation up here real quick.
Yep, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Thanks for the support on the slides, and I will just ask you to go ahead and advance that. So I'm Todd Olinsky-Paul with Clean Energy Group. Just a very brief a little bit of information about us. We are a nonprofit. We're located in Vermont. We work with state energy agencies across the country. We also work with national labs, DOE. We work with utilities, work with developers. I have really focused on energy storage for pretty much since I joined CEG in 2012. And the last few years, I've really focused on some policy development and analysis and support for policy development and program development at the state level. These are some of our foundation supporters on this slide. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about virtual power plants. This is something that we have worked on quite a bit over the last few years, and primarily in New England, which doesn't mean that it's not relevant in other places, but it does mean that, for one thing, we have funding to do so, but also there's a very good underlying economic case for this kind of model in New England. And we're very interested at this point in kind of exploring what that might look like in other regions. So let me just give you a little bit of underlying information here. The basic idea here is that virtual power plant, as I use the term, is an aggregation of distributed clean energy resources that are located behind customer meters, either residential or commercial, or both. In this case, energy storage, and that those distributed batteries behind customer meters get aggregated and dispatched on a signal from the utility, or in some cases from a third-party aggregator that contracts with the utility to do the dispatch. And typically, in New England at least, the main value of this is addressing regional peaks. As others have said, peak power is very expensive, and anything you can do to address that and reduce peaks saves money. So what we have is a system of aggregated, distributed, small batteries in thousands of residences and commercial establishments being dispatched on peak in order to reduce costs associated with that peak across the region, and thereby lower costs for all the ratepayers. In return, For this service, utilities pay the battery owners, or in some cases, leasers, the customers who are owning or leasing the batteries, just as they would pay otherwise a peaker plant that provides a similar service. The battery customers get to monetize their investment, often able to pay that off well within the lifespan of the equipment. Utilities obviously get to reduce those peak loads, and the ratepayers save money. Next slide, please. So this is not some futuristic concept that we might someday attain. These virtual power plants are being built now. Here in New England, we saw this start in Massachusetts and Rhode Island with something called the Connected Solutions Program, which we supported with some economic analysis and cost benefit analysis that we provided to those state agencies. I'll get a little bit more into that in a bit. We're also seeing this being run now in Connecticut, where there is a proposal from the Connecticut regulator for a 9-year program based on this model, and also a proposal for a similar program in New Hampshire following a successful pilot there. The Connected Solutions Program is run through the state energy efficiency programs, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then we have very similar programs that are being run by utilities through essentially demand response rather than through the energy efficiency programs. And sort of the one that I'll talk about there is just as an example is here in Vermont. Green Mountain Power has more than 2,000 residential customers enrolled now with batteries, and they have very successfully demonstrated that that's providing a lot of cost savings. But that's also being done in many other states. Next slide, please. So the key elements of this program, as I said, Connected Solutions is run through state efficiency programs. The way it works is the customers purchase or lease a battery. They sign a multi-year performance contract with the utility, or in some cases with a third-party aggregator. The utilities pay only for the services they're receiving. So these pay-for-performance contracts are based on the average performance of those batteries across the season. Each season it has a separate kind of calculation for customer payout. You can include equity provisions in order to make this more accessible for low-income communities. Those can include rebates, adders, favorable financing. In Massachusetts, there's a 0% interest heat loan available for energy efficiency purchases that applies to this program. Aggregators, as I said, can get involved and market the program to their customers and enroll them. And then once the program is in place, the behind the meter batteries, as I said, primarily used to reduce system-wide electric peaks. This is a little different from a demand charge management approach, where a battery would be used by a commercial customer to reduce their own facility peak. In this case, the batteries are being used to address the system peaks. It benefits all the ratepayers because it reduces costs. And of course, the host facilities get revenues and resilience benefits because in case of a grid outage, now you have a battery that can support your critical loads until the grid comes back. Because this is run through state energy efficiency programs, it's available to all customers in the state, regardless of the customer type, location, what their demand curve looks like, what kind of utility tariff they might be on. And one side effect that we found in analyzing some of the economics of this thing is that because there's a multi-year pay-for-performance contract, it tends to de-risk energy storage investments. In other words, investors have in the past viewed energy storage as a somewhat risky investment because if you're doing, for example, demand charge management, you have to predict your facility peak, you have to manage that battery so that you have it charged up when the peak hits and then you discharge it at the right time. There's a lot of room for error, especially when you're dealing with businesses whose primary business is not energy. And so in this case, it's really based on a technical solution, not a behavioral solution. And it's a set and forget kind of thing. The customer signs the contract, sets the battery, to respond to the signal, doesn't have to predict anything. And they can opt out, but if they don't opt out, then that battery gets dispatched. And typically the customer's not even aware that it's happening because it's not impacting their comfort the way a thermostat program might. It's not impacting their commercial activities the way a load reduction program might for a commercial customer. Next slide, please. So the reason that this works, and I'll just go through this very quickly. As I said, it is an efficiency program for these New England states, but it does require a little bit of a expansion of the concept of what efficiency is. Traditionally, efficiency just simply means using less electricity or less energy. In Massachusetts, they expanded this definition to include peak demand reduction. And of course, the difference is that traditional efficiency lowers net consumption, but typically doesn't really shift the peak. Whereas peak demand reduction shifts the peak, although it doesn't lower net consumption. And the reason this is so valuable, the little chart on the right here is a year's worth of electricity demand in Massachusetts. This is a result of a study done called State of Charge. They found that the top 10% of peak hours in the year are responsible for 40% of the total annual cost of electricity in the year. So those peak hours are extremely expensive, and designing the whole system to meet those occasional peaks is inefficient. It's an overbuilt system. So anything you can do to lower peaks helps to make that system more efficient over time. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what this program might look like to a customer. So our example is a commercial customer signs up for the program, installs a 60 kilowatt hour battery, signs up for the summer daily dispatch program, which is in Massachusetts pays $200 per kilowatt on average. And the dispatch calls are 3-hour calls. So you have to divide that battery capacity over the 3-hour call because you're getting paid on an average response. So essentially you do that math, 60 kilowatt hours divided by 3 hours is 20 kilowatt hours of load reduction on average. And then you multiply that by the $200 incentive rate, and you see that you can get at best a $4,000 seasonal payout. That's for one summer season. If you look at the table here, you can see the values for residential program participants in 4 different states in New England. So for example, if you happen to be in Connecticut, in Eversource territory, and you install a Powerwall, you could earn up to $6,200 over a 5-year period. And obviously the battery is good for 10 years. The Powerwall costs about $10,000 to install. It's not a bad payback for your investment. Next slide, please. So we have some early results from this program in Massachusetts. One of the utilities, National Grid, contracted with a consultant to do a study on the program. They found that based on just the first summer that they ran this program in 2019, that enrollment was increasing over time, that 65% of respondents said that having batteries for backup power was their primary motivation. They were really concerned about resilience. 94% never opted out of an event, and 97% said they would recommend the program and would likely continue with it. So pretty good customer acceptance. In terms of the how good it is at meeting those peaks, the average residential battery discharge was 5.5 kilowatts. At the summer payment rate for that of $225 a kilowatt for a residential customer, that means the average residential enrollee was netting, was earning a little over $1,200 for the summer season. If you add in the winter season, which is a much lower rate of payment, you'd get a payback for an average Powerwall style battery in about 6 years as a residential customer. Next slide, please. Another measure of how successful the program is, here, there are two red lines on this chart. The top one is the 3-year plan goal. The Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Program is a 3-year program, and then they revise it and go for another 3-year cycle. So the 3-year plan goal for 2020 was it looks somewhere around 330 megawatts of capacity. And you can see that the Connected Solutions program has very nearly met that as of the date of this data, which was sometime after the summer of 2020. What's interesting, though, is that Massachusetts has also set a Clean Peak goal, and they have a Clean Peak standard. It's the first state in the country to do so. Their Clean Peak goal for 2020 was only 100 megawatts. So you can see that just this small Connected Solutions program, which is a very small part of the overall efficiency budget, has exceeded that Clean Peak goal by a factor of 3. And most of that is commercial battery storage. There's 286 megawatts of commercial battery storage in the program to this point, and about 3 megawatts of residential, with the remainder of the residential load reduction due to thermostats. The thermostat program predated the battery program, so there were already a bunch of thermostat customers enrolled at this point. Next slide, please. I did mention that you don't have to do this through an efficiency program, although I'll tell you in a minute why I think that's a good idea. You can also do it as essentially a utility demand response style of program. Green Mountain Power here in Vermont is a leader in this space. They have 2 customer battery programs. One's called the Resilient Home Program, where the utility actually owns the residential batteries. It's kind of an unusual arrangement. They put 2 batteries per house. They're Tesla Powerwalls. The customer in that case pays to host those batteries for the resilience benefits. The other program is a Bring Your Own Device program, and this is the one that's more popular across the country with other utilities, where the customer owns or leases the battery. The utility simply contracts with the customer for dispatch on peak, just like the Connected Solutions program. GMP has more than 2,000 residential batteries in place. Just as an illustration of the resiliency benefits, a couple of years ago on Halloween, there was an outage. 1,100 residential battery customers of the utility were able to ride through that outage. The average duration of battery backup power was 9 hours, and the longest duration was 82 hours. Based on a PUC filing, the program is anticipated to generate about $2 million of net present value over its 15-year life. But I should mention that all of these programs have to pass a cost-benefit analysis test before they are begun. Next slide, please. So given that you can do this either through the state efficiency program or just directly through a utility demand response, why choose one over the other? Well, you can do it either way. I tend to like the efficiency program approach because, for one thing, most states have an efficiency program and they're very well funded. If you look at the chart on the right here, there are several, the first set of bars there on the left is the annual energy efficiency program goals for state efficiency programs, and including the dark blue is customer incentives. The dark blue bars on the right are customer incentives in annual demand response programs. So you could see the efficiency programs are much better funded on the whole. There's greater public policy input into them, so you can attach those incentives and programs to state policy goals. You can include equity measures. States can incentivize efficiency gains through utility performance incentive mechanisms. The statewide nature of the efficiency program supports equitable access. And also in the Connected Solutions model, customers can export power to the grid, and that's important. They're not limited to just reducing load to 0 and then stopping. They can actually, if there's additional power in the battery at that point, they can export the rest of it and get compensated for that as well. That's very important for residential customers particularly, because the load on your house is typically quite low. And so reducing that load to zero and then stopping means that you are very limited in the amount of compensation you could get for doing that, just simply because there's not a lot of load to reduce in the first place. If you can export the rest of the power, you can really maximize the value of that battery and maximize the benefit to the grid. I want to note that North Carolina's electric efficiency program spends over $145 million per year, almost 146 million. So there's a lot of potential there for adding batteries to a program of that size. Next slide, please. So why should public funds be spent on this? Well, the benefits outweigh the costs, and they accrue to all the ratepayers, not just the battery owners, because of the design of the virtual power plant program. I'm just going to skip right on to the next slide because getting at the end of the time here, and I want to share this with you. These are results of cost-benefit analyses that were conducted by the Connecticut Green Bank. They did 5 different cost-benefit tests, and a lot of you may know that each state uses its own one of these cost-benefit tests, or maybe a different one, but there's a limited number of them. Typically, a state will choose one and apply it to all their public clean energy incentive programs. And any kind of new technology added to those programs has to pass the cost benefit test to show that ratepayers are getting good return on their investment. So here you can see that energy storage passed all the tests, and want to point out that the RIM test, the one to the far right, if you score above 1 on the RIM test, it means that there's no cost shifting going on between customers. So that's kind of an unusual result, and it really tells us that everyone is benefiting from batteries in these programs, and that costs are not simply being shifted from certain ratepayers to other ratepayers. Next slide, please. So I think that's my last slide. Yep. Okay. So if you want more information, feel free to come to our website, and everything is freely available. And I will thank you very much. Good, Isaac.
Great stuff there, Todd. I, for one, and I'm sure the other panelists learned a lot from you. Well worth the time. I just want to remind everyone to, if you have questions or comments, please use the Q&A feature down to the lower right. We'll have a little bit of time at the end here for your feedback and questions. Going to turn over here to David Williamson. David, I'm going to turn off my camera and audio and share your slides in just a second.
Thank you, Isaac. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Williamson, and I'm an engineer with the Public Staff's Energy Division, where I work in the Rates and Energy Services section. As someone who goes before the commission, what I'm going to talk about today is geared more toward the IOUs and what we're seeing in the regulatory world right now and what's going on. So for those of you who don't know what the Public Staff is or what we do, we were created by General Statute in 1977 to represent the using and consuming public and to provide insight and expertise in matters that come before the commission. As a note, we are completely independent from the commission and their staff, meaning once the record has been closed and decision-making begins on the matter at hand, our commenting, just like with other parties, is over. Also, I'll note down at the bottom that little disclaimer that basically says anything I say today is my opinion, not the staff's or state of North Carolina. So if you could go to the next slide, please. All right, so here are a few of the key functions that are performed by the public staff. I won't go through all of them, but I will say that with growing policy and technological advances across all utility sectors, we are definitely keeping busy as we do our part to inform not only the commission, but our utility customers as well. If you can go to the next slide, please. All So topic is residential demand and how do we shape it? So let's think for a minute. What options do residential customers have at their disposal that are shaping residential load curve? This first bullet's probably the most obvious one on the list. It's solar rooftop systems. On our side, with the applications for these, they've skyrocketed since 2015. Taking a look at the commission's docket system this week, it shows that these applications have gone from our 5,000th docketed application in January of 2015 to now we're nearing our 33,000th application. So about 28,000 applications in a matter of about 6 years or so, in which I've been told places around 180 megawatts on the grid for just these SP items. Next, we have solar plus storage. It's also gaining traction. Storage components for small scale and utility scale systems are starting to be more frequent, with the price of storage starting to go down. As everyone knows, storage helps customers push off from buying at night when the sun isn't shining with the excess power that was generated from the previous day. And then the next one is community solar. I have down here HB 589. That was, I know we've previous presenters, they talked about their community solar programs, but this one was more geared towards the IOUs with Duke Energy. But community solar gives customers the options to buy into solar they don't own. They can receive credit on their electricity bills, and once this gets traction, it'll be a great option for customers that don't have the ability to place a solar on their home or just bear the upfront cost. Next slide, please. So another popular topic coming in is EVs and the charging stations. Recently, North Carolina's governor, his executive order 80 kind of set the stage for EV growth in North Carolina with its goal of 80,000 zero emission vehicles by 2025. So there's been a really big push from customers and utilities to kind of get the grid ready for this transition in order to meet that goal. And then the next bullet, demand side management, energy efficiency. This one's very popular. It's been around since well before North Carolina's Senate Bill 3 legislation. But with that legislation, it kind of put a highlight on DSM and EE as alternatives to new generation. Electric IOUs, gas IOUs, munis, co-ops, all the way down to city governments, like what we've heard in previous presenters, all of them are working to bring DSM and EE measures to customers in need of those resources. And so last on this list, I have dynamic rate pilots. These kind of came about as a result of Duke Energy Carolina's 2016, their sub 1146 rate case. These pilots, it's 9 total pilots for Duke Energy Carolina's RE, RS, and SGS rate classes. And each one of those will have 3 different structures of critical peak pricing, time of use critical peak pricing, and then time of use demand critical peak pricing rate structures. These pilots are finishing their availability, but will have their data used in upcoming rate studies, which I'll get to in a minute. All right, if you could go to the next slide, thank you. So now that we have a better idea of the current options that are out there, and I know I didn't list them all, but how do we maximize them? So I think this goes without saying, but it all starts with the data. If we don't have accurate data, then we're probably progressing blindly. So we need to know what is an important statistic and how to measure it, and then how do we apply it. Utilities all around the country are working to do 2 things to kind of set them up for success with their data. And first one being that they're placing AMI metering on their systems to get better quality data, to kind of paint a better picture for not only them, but for their customers. And previous presenters talked about how AMI is all over their grid, and it's always a good thing to hear. And then number 2, they're updating their billing and customer operation systems to be able to handle this new influx of data. These build outs are going to impact customer interactions, rate design, reliability improvements, all of this going forward. And then lastly on this bullet is other ways that utilities are using this data is in their refinement to their planning process. System planning here in North Carolina is morphing into a more modern and efficient system planning process. For starters, you have Duke that's kind of moving towards their ISOP planning process. And then you have Dominion that's moving towards adding on a distribution planning to their IRP process. Next slide, please. So finally, so how are we using this data to shape residential demand? So there's been numerous stakeholder groups over the last several years. I've got some of them listed here, but not all of them. So we've got the DSM and EE that's been going on for several years now. They meet, Duke Energy meets every 2 months. Dominion meets frequently, but kind of infrequently. It's not a set every so often, but they meet pretty often every year. And then you have the Duke Energy Electric Vehicle Stakeholder Group, which is kind of new, but it has been meeting regularly since the EV pilot was recently approved for Duke Energy a few months ago. So I'm interested to see where that stakeholder process is going. And then you got the Integrated System and Operations Planning, which is that ISOP planning tool that I was telling you about. It's pretty much, in the beginning, it met pretty frequently, but I think now it's morphing more towards being a component of the IRP process. So they meet pretty regularly right now, but it'll eventually move into its IRP process. And then this last bullet on there is a new group on affordability and low income, and that came out as a result of recent Duke Energy rate cases that came out less than 30 days ago for anyone that was curious. So in there, it kind of gave some guidance on what this stakeholder process would be, but I'm interested to see kind of where it's going. Next up here are recent studies. These are basically to gain better understanding on how the residential load shape is morphing with new technologies. Duke Energy just recently completed a winter DSM study, which was focused on tackling winter peak demand basically through any means possible, just trying to see what it would take to handle winter peak. It looked into traditional DSM, non-traditional DSM, and rate tariffs, and that was for both the residential and non-residential rate classes. And then you have the dynamic time of use rate pilots that I just got through talking about. It basically was designed to study how customers are reacting to price signals. And then you have the energy storage study, which was as a result of HB 589, and it essentially was to gain a better understanding of how storage principles for end use. And then down the last major bullet I have was another result of the Duke Energy rate cases that just came out. And this is where the commission gave the green light to start a comprehensive rate design study. This study is going to facilitate the majority of what I've talked about here today and analyze North Carolina's current rate schedules and see if more refinement or additions are possible, or just what it would look like. And what I mean by this is kind of, residential solar tariffs, residential EV tariffs, should they be in there? Are they possible with the current structures that are going on? And kind of the bullets that I have here are kind of the things that they're going to look into for this rate structure, for this rate study. It's going to look at cost of service and rate design adequacy. It's going to look at the level of service from firm to non-firm. It's going to look and see what unbundling the rates is going to look like. And then it's going to look at dynamic pricing designs from time of use to real-time pricing. If you could, next slide, please. So in closing, there's a lot that we have done, but as you can see, there's so much more coming down the line that will work toward shaping residential demand. And I can't wait to see where it takes us here in North Carolina.
All right. Thank you very much, David. Great job of boiling it all down and getting us up to date on what's happening, and especially all the regulatory proceedings and work groups that are factoring into shaping residential demand. At this time, I'd like to ask the other panelists to turn on their audio and video, and we'll have a little bit of discussion here. We have about 20 minutes left. I guess I'll kick it off here. For the utilities in the room, and maybe even, David, for you as a public advocate, how do customer perspectives on energy efficiency and demand reduction shape your program? Have you surveyed customers? Do you get a lot of input from unsolicited input, or are you using other data to really figure out what customers want and what they're going to respond to? Obviously, you've been having good results, so I'm just curious, as to how you came about some of these things.
I'll just say that, the one thing that utilities are facing is the diversity of our membership, as you can imagine. I could have 4 different conversations with 4 different members and get in 4 different answers. You would have some that say affordability and reliability square none is all we care about. And you have someone you could have another conversation which says, I'm willing to pay more to know that I could have a greener energy source and energy power. So we have to balance those conversations and make sure we get the broad swath of it. That's why multiple programs for multiple members is really the way that we're going to have to put this, because every member is going to have their own sense of education of what they want to do, and their own sense of what they're willing to do as a homeowner. Does that mean they just change their behavior? Or do they invest heavily in home energy automation so that the house does it for them? These are the different types of programs that you have to consider when you're putting that out to a very diverse membership.
I I have a little perspective on that. I think one of the things that is exactly right about what Don said is they're so different, the different kind of segments. And we've stepped up our game, I think, as cooperatives and utilities as a whole, in terms of identifying these different segments and marketing directly to them on an appeal to what's important to them. So one of the projects we're working on now is a home energy performance report that will go to people we've identified as frugal, people we've also identified as energy efficient, interested, and as well as people that we've identified through meter data as being having high cooling load during the summer and having a lot of potential to reduce our peak demand by changing their behavior, or perhaps using our existing programs for energy efficiency rebates for heat pumps, for weatherization improvements. So basically, identifying who's what and getting them a message that appeals to their interest in reducing power cost, in being more energy efficient, in being more green. So I think we do need to tell a different story to the different types of members we have, but it needs to align with a common goal that they're part of a cooperative as a whole, or part of a utility as a whole, and we're all on the same team trying to keep rates low and provide reliable, exceptional service.
Well, certainly as cooperatives, you guys have an excellent model where your members have a real stake in what goes on at the organization. David or Todd, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So the DSM&E world, I've been one of the primary reviewers for Duke and Dominion on their riders for probably the last 6 years or so. I mean, it all boils down to kind of what Don was talking about. It's a combination of education and willingness. The customer has to understand what they're signing up for, and then they have to be willing to kind of accept what it's going to be like. I mean, there's water aerators, probably the perfect example. Putting a water shower head aerator in their bathroom, it's definitely going to change the experience they have whenever they're taking a shower, but it is the energy savings that you're going to get from that shower head aerator worth the shower that you're going to have, as far as water pressure is what I'm getting at. So it's definitely a mix.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not a utility, obviously, but I would say, to the extent that these programs are voluntary programs, people are signing up. You can judge it by the popularity of the program. If people are signing up for these programs and participating and not opting out, or not dropping out, then the program's probably, you know, a good one to that extent. But I will also say that one thing that we need to have generally in the clean energy conversation is a discussion about equity issues, and recognizing that everyone is not equally able to participate in some of these kinds of programs, and sometimes it takes a little more effort, a little more, you know, resources to reach, you know, under-resourced communities. And that is something that is very important, especially when it comes to things like energy cost savings and resiliency, because those communities are the ones that need those benefits the most. They're hardest hit by natural disasters and power outages. They have the least ability to recover, and they are paying the largest portion of their income toward energy costs. So it's important to make sure that we're, you know, equitably providing these kinds of programs.
Yeah, I agree 100% there, Todd. You know, resources, financial resources are a big challenge for many people. And, you know, I think there are some ideas on the table here in North Carolina that are innovative that may help in that area, including on-bill financing or PACE financing, other things that, you know, could be brought to bear to overcome that obstacle. Is that an obstacle others of you are seeing in you know, really reaching all your customers? Or are there other obstacles, I guess, that you have in terms of flattening residential load?
I think that yeah, you know what Todd was saying is true. I was looking. It is a financial burden to implement some of this, but that's why if we could focus on rates that would give them some benefit. Wake Electric is not in the place where we're going to give major rebates as incentives, but what we'd rather do is give them the rates that recognize that because of this investment, they're not only saving themselves money, but they're saving our cooperative money, which gives us a chance to really promote that they're helping all of our members do that, which is why we're willing to give them that rate. And when that sort of happens, we recognize right now that is the biggest obstacle is the financial burden of these investments to make that happen across our board for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the advantages of being a cooperative is you can copy off the smartest kid in the room and not get in any trouble. So whether that's, we're going to be, I think our board just approved our own EV time of use rate, like Wake's. And, you know, there's the way we've been able to use community solar as a cost savings tool for low income and high usage households. There's what other cooperatives like Roanoke have done with the PAYS model for financing. We took a stab at doing our own self-funded Energy Saver loan program, and then pivoted recently to using Electel Federal Credit Union's loan program for energy efficiency improvements. I guess what I'm getting at is there's just a lot of different ways to skin a cat, and it's just kind of having your eyes and ears open to what other co-ops and what other utilities are doing here in the state and nationally, and trying to pick and choose some of the best ideas that you see, because there is no shortage of good ideas in terms of helping the households that need that assistance, and to try and make this an inclusive situation where it's not charity, but it's people electing to participate in programs that appeal to them and then seeing a direct savings from it.
So I'm hearing one takeaway here: co-ops are leading the pack, huh?
Of course.
We like to say that.
Now, energy storage is, you know, a technology that everyone's talking about a lot. You know, we actually were part of the team that did the energy storage study under HB 589. We have it does offer a lot of opportunity for flattening loads. We do have a question from a participant on this. Basically, you know, I guess, David, you had mentioned that using energy storage at nighttime will help the customer, but the question was based on seeing on their system that solar companies are wiring up the batteries to only come on when there is a power outage instead of discharging the batteries every day. Seems like that may be either a utility policy issue or a technical issue. Is that, I guess, how do we overcome that challenge of you know, batteries only working in an outage versus coming on for peak or discharging to the grid for peak reduction?
I think Todd addressed that pretty well, and I do want to point out that these batteries are pretty technically savvy devices, and they usually have an interface that allows you to program the discharge. I know the one that the Tesla Powerwall that we put at our office, we definitely tell it when to discharge, but we also can tell it never discharge more than 75%, leaving that 25% there for backup power. And I know there's some other products coming out on the market that help you identify different circuits in your house to prioritize those circuits so that you can make sure you get maximum life of the battery. I do know that that the original batteries that came out were not meant for discharge every day. But I think that pretty much going forward, you're going to see that because like Todd answered, that the justification is not in resiliency alone. It is in being able to participate in these programs and take yourself off the peak to reap the benefits of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I can't see who posted that, but I would definitely ask them to reach out to their utility provider and just kind of have a conversation between their solar installer and their utility provider, just kind of make sure that everyone's synced up on what technical possibilities are there for them.
Sure. And it goes back to, a lot of what you're talking about, Don, with the things that these batteries do. It goes back to the data. We need to study these things and optimize them. I've worked with folks that put in batteries at the utility scale, and they're certainly working hard to optimize them to get the maximum savings out of them. And I'm sure that that's possible at the residential scale too. So looking at what's happening these days, I think, for example, the president announced a plan to reduce carbon emissions in the US by 50% by 2030 today. Not only that, there's many, lots been happening in the market. The market is driving a lot of change with lower cost renewables, lower cost storage. None of us can doubt, though, that, all these things in state, federal legislation and regulations and technology are going to drive electricity towards really cleaner, lower emissions. What impact do you see these changes having on residential load shape? Do you see them helping or hurting or providing opportunities?
I think it's gonna move the shape of the load significantly as specifically solar becomes more prevalent, especially on a utility scale. We're going to be building a 11 megawatt utility scale array. Should be online by November, December of this year. But something that large is going to take that 2 to 6 hour window that we have now, and the solar production should push that a little bit later, in my estimation. I think California is already seeing that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I would say that you take the announcement that the president had today, you take the announcement of the governor that says I want 80,000 electric vehicles, you think, well, the load's got to increase. And I think that one of the skeptics in the world would say, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to raise the amount of electricity we deliver and lower it? But it's width shaping. And you take electric vehicles is probably the best avenue to do that in. Because if you think about the very first part of my presentation, I said I've just switched out 17,000 streetlights to LED, lowering my overnight usage in the middle of the night by 70%, freeing up capacity in the middle of the night. That if these incentives, and suddenly, and just like with the amount of solar, if we charge our cars when solar is producing the most, we have excess and we can handle it. So it's not as much as just lowering the peak, it's raising the valleys and using this in the valleys. And so I think shaping the residential peak is everything, is the solution to bringing on the more electronics and more electricity use, is actually raising the valleys and making sure that when we do have add-ons, that they happen off peak and we are able to manipulate that a little bit.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, well, just as a point of reference. So we run something called the Clean Energy States Alliance, which is essentially a membership organization for state clean energy agencies. And up until a year ago, we through that organization, we had something called the RPS Collaborative, which was sort of a working group of state energy officials who were involved with running state RPSs, Renewable Portfolio Standards. We no longer have an RPS collaborative. We now, in its place, have a 100% clean energy collaborative because so many of the states that we work with are moving away from this kind of incremental RPS toward a 100% goal. And just in the past 2 or 3 years, a number of states have set these 100% goals, either in terms of 100% renewable or zero net emissions or whatever however they might want to kind of construct that. So, and what Don and was saying is right. On the one hand, you have these movements at the state level and now at the federal level toward cleaning up electricity and increasing electrification to clean up the other sectors, the buildings and the transportation sector. On the other hand, you look at what does that mean for the grid? Electrification, if you project out electrification over the next, advancing over the next few years, we're going to see the Northeast, for example, flipping from summer peaking to winter peaking because of moving all that heating that's now being taken care of through things like natural gas into the electrical sector in the winter. So there's a lot of changes. These goals are very effective at the state level and hopefully at the federal level, but they do create a lot of changed underlying kind of market dynamics. And you really have to look at what's the interaction between, for example, everyone switching over to EVs, when do they charge? What does that mean for the generation side? What does it mean can you use those as distributed resources and feed that back onto the distribution grid, for example? So we need, unfortunately, this is all being done rather piecemeal. And I hope that this federal goal setting is, an indicator that maybe we'll have a little bit more of a, unified or goal setting, or at least, kind of view of where we're going, because, states are way out ahead and they're doing great, but it does make for a very fragmented marketplace.
Well, we can all hope, Todd, for things to be more integrated. I think we definitely always realize the benefits of that in hindsight. That's all the questions that I had. Does anyone have any final comments before we close the session? No. Well, this is amazing information that all of you shared. I think we could go on and on and on here. Hopefully we've opened the door to some collaboration too. We had I think really good participation. We had 27 attendees, which I think is pretty decent for virtual these days, especially the last session here. I applaud all of your leadership. I really thank you all for your time participating here. And I thank everyone for attending the State Energy Conference. We appreciate the support of all our sponsors, and of course, obviously, we hope to see everyone soon in person. I hope that all of you get a chance to take your shot and take it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week.
Appreciate it.